Dr. Mary Matthews and Nicole Chamberlain, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We're grateful to be here.
Yeah.
I love that you both have followed your passions and you kind of seem to have this attitude of let's just see where this takes us in life. So do you feel like you are both kindred spirits in that regard? And how did you two even meet in the first place?
Yes. You want me to take this one?
I mean, partly.
And you can interject.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
I think we feel ourselves as kindred weirdos more than spirits. But yeah, you want to go ahead and talk about how we met?
Yeah. Well, we met, it was 2011, so we're going on 10 years now.
Wow.
And she just emailed me out of the blue.
It's the only way to make friends.
Yes, the only strangers on the internet. She had a flute duo that she composed, Chatter, and she was looking for people to give the premiere. And at the time, I played in a flute duo, and we had a website. So she had been on our website and listened to our recordings, and yeah, she sent us an awesome email that didn't just say, hey, will you play my piece, but it was, here's why I think it's a good fit for your repertoire and for you specifically as performers. And we loved the piece. It explored a lot of extended techniques, and it was something we were excited to take on. And so we just said, yeah, we want to give this a worthwhile premiere, so we'll hang on to it until something big pops up. And then 2 days later, we were invited to perform at the International Alliance for Women in Music Congress. And that was it. That was the perfect opportunity. So we met in person for the first time. I guess it was NFA in 2011 in Charlotte.
Yes.
But then we worked together for the first time for that premiere a few months later in Flagstaff, Arizona. And we had fun. I mean, all of our joke is over the past 10 years, every time we get together for like a professional thing, we end up with some camping mishap, or we're lost on a dirt road, or
end up in the hospital.
Nicole ends up in the emergency room.
No.
So we have good stories. And
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, the very first time we met in Flagstaff, she was driving us back.
I was not driving.
Oh, you weren't driving. That's right. So
wait, no, I was driving because I was the one with the rental car.
Right.
I forgot about that.
Yes.
You two were stranded.
Yeah,
I was driving.
And
Why
you
do I
took us
remember
back,
it differently?
you know, to the house where we were being hosted.
Yeah.
We were lost on a dirt road in the pitch black in the middle of Arizona, and
That
we didn't
sounds great.
die. So
Yeah, you're
so
here.
it turned out well. Yeah,
It did have like, this is where they dump her dead body vibes.
Right.
But we made
for
it
all
out.
of us,
Yeah.
we were all scared.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I was outnumbered though. It
Yes.
was just me.
Yes. So it was fun. So we had a great time, and both her music and just spending time together, and the way she rehearsed, like the way she gave feedback as we were putting together your piece. You know, there was nowhere to rehearse, so I remember we were in a closet.
We're in the basement, next to like
It
a
worked.
water
basement
heater.
closet, and we're
Yeah.
like, let's just run it for her. We want the composer to hear it and give feedback. And she did seem like a very go with the flow, great sense of humor, same type of sarcasm type of person.
A delight.
And so in that way, yeah, I think we very much are similar. But then as we started working together more, we also realized that we have opposite strengths too in our, you know, just the way that we work and operate, but complementary opposite strengths.
Definitely. We both like to do different things.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Nicole, did you do that often, of reaching out specifically to groups that you wanted to premiere your works and working with them so closely?
I mean, I knew it's usually a fruitless endeavor. I mean, it seems and feels very spammy if you do it the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so you have to be very careful about it. In the beginning, I did a lot more of it. I had a lot of free time. I mean, like, it was right after I hadn't been freelancing very long. Like, I had a day job as a web designer, and I had finally quit to do music full time. And so I found myself with a lot of free time on my hands. And so I knew if I wanted someone else to play my junk, I was going to have to introduce people to it. And I mean, I had recordings of me playing it, but you know, the goal was to find people much better than you to play your stuff. It's, at least that was my goal. And then go from there. Like, 'cause I'm inherently lazy. So if someone else can do the work,
Playing
One thing that was great is that the recording of Chatter that you sent us, she recorded both parts by herself.
I don't know if it was great.
So, we got to hear it
available.
Yeah, on Flute rather than a MIDI file, which especially for extended techniques.
Awful. Yeah.
And every time I've won a competition or gotten through to a performer, it's because I had a live recording. MIDI has never worked.
No.
So live recordings are always more effective.
Mm-hmm. Now I want to kind of fast forward from the day you met, and now you've released together and published your new method book called Beatboxing and Beyond, an essential method for the 21st century flutist. So is it really essential for every flutist today to learn? And what contributions did you each make to this project to make it happen?
Yeah. So the breakdown, so Nicole composed all of the etudes, and then I wrote all of the step-by-step practice breakdowns and teaching tips and compiled a repertoire list. And so I did the words end and she did the music.
In my opinion, the hard part. She did. Yeah. I had no desire. And that's what I think took the book so long to come to fruition, because I had no interest in doing that part.
The writing.
Yeah, and that's what it would need. And so
and I don't compose, so
and this is part of why we work well together, because we both hate doing the other person's job.
So it helps make it approachable to anybody that wants to pick it up. Do you think you've accomplished that with the book?
I think so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, we're both flute players, which I think also helps. It's just not like I play a different instrument. I'm very familiar with the instrument. I know the pitfalls. I started writing music for myself to learn how to do extended techniques, because I did not get... I'm from that generation where, like, that wasn't really a thing. It was still gimmicky to do extended techniques. They were considered effects.
You're right.
And so my generation, I mean, my flute professor, Dr. Wallen, was from even an earlier generation. I was his last, he had been teaching for almost 50 years by the time I graduated. I was one of his last students, and he introduced me to new music, but he was lost at sea himself. I mean, we were in it together. So I didn't get a whole bunch of instruction as far as that while I was in school, and then I had to seek it out after. But the music that was available for extended techniques was for really crazy advanced players. And my focus wasn't flute performance in college, it was composition, and so I was coming with a very different skill set, and there just wasn't a lot available for people who had the newer, they were getting introduced to this kind of stuff. It was way advanced stuff or nothing.
Right.
And I think that was our evolution. I mean, you saw it in your studio class, and you had more of a background in extended techniques than I ever did when you graduated.
Yeah, I definitely want to ask Mary about how, kind of the evolution you've seen in your studio and with your students in terms of knowledge of extended techniques.
And I feel very lucky. I feel like I've watched this evolution in extended techniques over the time that I was in school myself, all the way up until now teaching at the university level, because when I was in high school, I did start to learn some extended techniques, but they were mostly in the context of like Trevor Wise' tone book is where I learned whistle tones, and having throat tension issues as an early undergrad is how I learned to sing and play, because that was the diagnosis. Flutter tonguing helped with a lot of tension issues with my articulation. So I did learn extended techniques I guess earlier on in my flute journey, right, my flute education, but it still wasn't as present in the repertoire that we were being taught in a conservatory or, undergraduate or graduate level. And then all of a sudden, immediately upon, graduating and starting my performing career, most of the music that I was asked to play had a ton of extended techniques, and I would include chatter in that. So there was the bit that I got through my education, and then a whole lot that I had to kind of teach myself. And I learned a lot actually through performing Nicole's music. And then as I started performing this and started teaching, and I taught, private students before I was teaching at the collegiate level. So I've taught 4-year-olds all the way up through college. and I start to see the band music that they're bringing me, or the all-state music or competition music that they're bringing me that does include extended techniques, younger and younger. And so not only did I find a need to teach it because they had to perform that rep, but I was also teaching it to help them with their traditional flute playing, just as I was taught. And so what I had to do in my own studio was kind of improvise, use Tafnel and Gobert, use Moïse de la Sonorité scales, because, you know, they all have to learn their scales, and just incorporate extended techniques into them. So I would say, do T and G1 this week. I want you to do the first articulation, second articulation there in the book, and then do it all fluttered, and then do it all pizzicato tonguing. So it was just about taking what we were already doing, that's a very traditional flute education, and then adding extended techniques into it. Because when I didn't do this, when I just handed them charanga or handed them honami or these great, you know, staples of the undergrad flute repertoire, without any of that practice ahead of time, those pieces were terrifying. You know, they were scared to take them on because they were learning how to do something brand new at the exact same time that they were learning how to play this piece that also has, you know, hard rhythm, hard technique, endurance aspects. So we both felt a need as teachers, you know, not only as performers and composers, but as teachers, we felt a need for a resource like an etude book, like the method books that we can all hand our students and teach them their skills, and then they can apply it to rep for extended techniques.
And this is, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, no. I was just going to say, I think we missed, you asked a great question about, is it essential? You know, we have the word essential in our title. And no, I think that's a wonderful question that we asked ourselves, because we started writing this at the beginning of the pandemic when essential became this very common buzzword of essential workers, or, you know, and so we wanted to make sure we weren't just using it because it was this buzzword that lived in our head in that time, at that point in history. And when we started breaking it down and saying this method isn't about teaching people how to play extended techniques so they can play new music, but it's about how extended techniques help your traditional flute playing and make you a better musician in general. And we started saying that new music isn't that new anymore. We're referencing pieces in our book all the way from 1950 that are using extended techniques. So we're coming on almost 100 years. And I know, right? Am I doing that right? Almost 100 years. Almost 70. And we feel like it really is essential to be a well-rounded flutist to be able to tackle all the rep that was composed from 1950 through today.
And did you have an easy time publishing this work? You did this through your own publication company, right, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically how I only operate. I mean, I worked as a music engraver and worked for a publishing company, and then they wanted to publish my music and realized I was doing the engraving, and because I had a history of graphic design, I was always also designing the covers and giving them 80 to 90% of the profits, and I was like, this is so dumb. Why am I doing this? So like, I mean, all I needed to do was buy a printer and, you know, find the correct gauge of paper I wanted to use, and folding and stapling. I mean, I can do that. So yeah, I decided that was an endeavor I wasn't afraid to take on, and that way I can not only secure being in charge and having control over the whole product, and the royalties that came with it, but also performance royalties, because it's another thing you have to split with the publisher if you are not the self-publisher. And so that's a huge cut of your income. And if you don't mind fiddling with it, it's fine. And I'd also done web design, so making a website wasn't, I mean, applying skills I did from, you know, 9 to 6 every day, which sometimes is even longer, to what I want to do, which is music, which is a lot more gratifying. So yeah, so I have always operated under, well, not always, within the past 10 years have operated under my own publishing company, Spotted Rocket Publishing. So it's just me and my husband's music, because he's also a composer.
It's great. And this is kind of a very loaded question, but what is a common misconception, do you think, about new music and composers of new music?
I always get the response when I meet people, oh my God, you're so normal. So I don't know what that means.
Compliment and insult?
I take it as a compliment. I think mainly a lot of that is because I do perform a lot and I do understand practicalities of preparing a piece. I think. I hope Mary may have contrary ideas about me, but
well, I think you're really approachable. Right? Like,
is that what the confusion is?
Well, it's sense of humor, being able to go out and grab dinner, have a drink, and have just that instant comfort with someone. Because as performers, it's stressful working with a new composer or playing a piece for a composer, because we really want to do a great job, right? We want to do the piece justice, and so it's intimidating. But the the vibe you give off immediately upon meeting you, it's not intimidating, because she usually cracks a joke within 30 seconds of meeting someone, and then everyone's comfortable.
If it's not an inappropriate joke,
right.
But
or uncomfortable.
And I think the other bad rap is I think most people think new music is like a particular set of tonality, and it's not the case. I mean, we kind of live in a no rules time period for writing music, so it could be really anything, and I think people don't understand that, and especially when they hear extended techniques, like it can't possibly be set in a tonal setting, and that's not always the case either. I mean, and I think we forget that string players actually do things like pizzicato and different kinds of bowing and all these other effects, and they do it in a tonal setting. Right. And it's just another technique. It's not a technique for modern times. And so I think that's another misconception people seem to have about new music. And that's what, when audience members come up to me afterwards, that they've somehow got roped into a new music performance. Audience people tend to tell you what they feel, especially if they don't know who you are. Like, I like to sit in an audience and no one knows who I am, because people will talk about the piece.
All right, you can eavesdrop a little bit too.
Oh, yeah, it's the best. It's the best part of being a composer, most of the time. But like they'll say, "I'm surprised. I thought this was going to be something else." Usually not something they deem listenable, for whatever that is for them. But yeah, I think that's a misconception.
And do you have any advice for fellow composers that are writing flute music? I mean, you are a performer yourself, so you have some concept of what's feasible, what's not, what will probably get under a flutist's skin if you keep asking them to do it over and over again. So do you have any advice for them? And do you think, on the other hand, do you think it's important for composers to also be active in performing?
Well, yes. So about the performing part, being an active performer, I feel like is important, especially in your early stages, because no one else is going to play your music, frankly. Maybe your friends will, but your best bet is yourself in the very beginning. And my composition professor, William Davis, was is a fantastic bassoon player. And so he was a big advocate throughout my undergrad, like, please keep playing. And even though I had fulfilled my performance requirements as a composition major, encouraged me to keep playing throughout the whole degree, and I did. And then as far as like what other tips or advice I would give, is for flute players. Flute players love new music and they eat it up. I mean, I don't know if, it's just an explosive amount of participation in new music. And they're always really interested. Flute choir especially is hungry for new music. And I think that's an avenue a lot of people, it's not glamorous, I guess. People want to write for orchestras and stuff like that. But oh my God, chamber music and flute choir music is where you'll get the most welcoming, I think, experience. And that would be my best advice. And I don't know, as far as like what flute players are just over or what they hate to see, I think is just inflexibility. Like if you give them a piece and the flute player says, this may not be possible. Well, I know a lot of composers are also used to hearing that. I've had another flute player who was not a flute player tell me something wasn't possible, and then I played it on my flute for them, and they were not aware that I was so good. So sometimes there is pushback about that. So you should listen with an open mind and try to get to the bottom of what is challenging for this. It may be for that particular one player on that one particular instrument, or it may be an underlying problem that you need to address if you want this piece to be performed in the future. I think it's the inflexibility of a lot of composers, right? Does that get under your skin? I've heard you complain about that sometimes when you've tried to bring a problem to a composer and there's no empathy there.
Yeah. Well, inflexibility on either side, or also just not communicating early in the process on either side. What I love about working with really accessible, approachable composers is that I can text them, I can ask a question or send a recording and get feedback, and it can be a collaboration. And I feel like setting that up early on in the process of, are you sending me a piece that you already wrote and it's done and this is the final product and I'm just here to perform it? Or are we working together on a commission? Am I actively involved in the process? So you're sending me things and then I'm giving feedback. And I just like to know that going into it. And I think that's how we avoid stressful situations like that where, you know,
I don't give you that because I'm a flute player, but if I was like with the bassoon concerto that I wrote, like he got pieces, the bassoonist, he's been getting pieces since from, also because there was a tight deadline for the performance and I didn't want to leave him like in the dark when I finished all 3 movements and be like, here you go, enjoy your next 2 months, you know. So like I was giving him stuff as soon as I felt ready to share.
So open communication.
Yeah, I love when a composer, I just had this a couple weeks ago, sends me an email and says, this is the sound world that I'm writing in. I think is how he worded it. And I'm going for this effect in the flute. And what do you think? Head joint only? Should we do whistle tone? Should we? And I said, oh, really cool. Let me sit down with my flute and this recording that you sent me, and then I'll try different extended techniques. And then I sent him files and told him what I did. And then it was this great collaboration on just, you know, one technique at the beginning of the piece.
Because if you don't play the instrument, it feels so foreign as a composer. And so like having that, I mean, unless you've written for it a ton, and if you're starting to dive into extended techniques, it's really hard to gauge where the weight of things, especially because there may not be a lot of circumstances or examples to listen to. You know, so like how some people don't know that a whistle tone is pretty much useless if there's anything else going on. You know, you might as well not be playing. So if it's the only thing happening, yes, you know, possibly. Like whistle tones are the most fragile, I think, of the extended techniques, which is why I just don't bother. And then I'm bad at them.
Well, now we have an etude. And we can
on it.
On there. We talk a lot about low flutes too, volume, how you know they get progressively softer, and so that is one thing that I mention in the book as well. We hope that it can be somewhat of a resource for composers as well, especially composers who don't play the flute, because Nicole does give standardized notation, and we'll put an asterisk that says sometimes you'll see this notated in these different ways, or this technique is also referred to with this term. Or I'll say, if you try this on a low flute, it's either more or less effective. So we're trying to also address just a lot of the common questions that we're asked as performers, and you as a composer of new music for flute.
It's maddening to composers how similar techniques are not the same, called the same among different instruments.
Sure.
Oh yeah, I don't really think about that as someone who only plays and like is the music for one instrument, but I can see that being infuriating.
You have to keep it all straight. There's so many like squirrels to wrangle in the scenarios on all these scenarios. So I mean, you know, so we also help that kind of, and then, you know, extended techniques aren't really standardized, and as long, you know, it's basically trying your best to give the most common iteration that it's going to appear in the piece. But you know, for composers, another, I guess, tip, oh my God, performance notes will clarify everything. So even if you're using a different notation, if there's that performance note in the score to help guide the performer to know what exactly you want. These are helpful too.
I love the story that I found online about how you wrote Death Whistle, kind of really taking advantage of the things that drive people nuts about the piccolo and really going for it. And the piece now even has its own merch, right? So are you kind of surprised at how it took off, Nicole?
I'm always surprised anybody will take any attention to any of my garbage. But that one, was a fun to write. And that one, Dr. Elizabeth Robinson was the commissioner of that. And I think she has a particularly sassy sense of humor that I enjoy immensely. And she also has zero filter or boundaries. And so we were joking about it. It was all a joke. The whole thing is a joke, which are mainly, we joke about pieces I should write all the time. But Elizabeth's like, let's write it. So, so I mean, like the name Death Whistle was from those jokes. You know, ear knife, I think one of the movements is something everybody's familiar with, and that's those high notes. And I think some of that came from her love of the Hanson Symphony. You know, I think you have to be deranged to play piccolo, and not be upset about what people think of you, especially the second violins.
Yeah.
And then ballistophobia is the fear of being shot, which is the whole joke, right? You know, how do you get two piccolo players in tune? You shoot one. And then the last movement. So if you go online to hashtag piccolo, my God, you can find the conversation Elizabeth and I have about piccolo in general. I mean, and her idea of merch was kind of also Elizabeth's, because she sent me a t-shirt early on that had hashtag piccolo, my God, I need to practice. And so I was like, okay. So, you know, naturally I had to have a t-shirt with Death Whistle on it. And just, you know, the graphic was a joke, everything was a joke, and it's just fun that everybody else has embraced it. And I think mainly people buy that piece because of the joke and not necessarily the content.
Everyone can relate.
Piece. And I should say I've taught that piece. That piece is very popular amongst my undergrads, who, especially the ones who are hesitant to play piccolo, especially solo piccolo, will say, well, I'll play that one because that's funny. Right?
Which is great. Yeah, it's great that it's getting people to be open about performing solo pick. Yeah.
If you're going to be terrified of it, just lean in.
Just go for it.
And then you've hidden in there so many great teaching concepts like mixed meter and, you know, some extended techniques, but not a ton in that piece. So it really is a gateway to teach a lot about playing the piccolo. So I love it because they're having fun and I'm teaching them something all at the same time.
There are some hidden excerpts. So the other funny thing in Piccolo, my God, there are some hidden excerpts that Elizabeth made the mistake of complaining about in her season with Topeka Symphony. So I trolled her website and was like, oh yeah. So I would use, like, you know, I won't say which ones, but there are, she was like, I thought that and she was like, this is supposed to be the hardest movement, but I find it strangely like, okay, like fine. I'm like, cause girl, you practiced it all season.
Right.
You just don't realize it. It's all like cobbled together.
Yeah.
So
And then Mary, as a performer, is there a different kind of satisfaction you get on the stage when you're introducing these new works and unknown pieces to an audience for the first time?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, most of my more recent performing is new music and world premieres, and I do think that's so fun because you are, you know, showing someone something brand new for the very first time that hopefully they connect with, and then you have that experience of talking about it after the concert and finding out what did they hear or what did they find that was interesting. And I'm always amazed what their favorite pieces are on a program because they're usually very different from mine as the performer.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I'll also say that I think that same thrill can come from just sharing a new piece that someone's never heard before, but from any time period. And so even before I got really into new music, I liked performing, you know, sonatas. My whole dissertation was about the flute sonatas of Anna Bonn, who, you know, not many
fascinating
people,
by the way.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. And just not many people have heard of her music, being a woman composer in that transitional period from the Baroque to classical period. And so I'll be doing one of those on my faculty recital in a few weeks. And I don't think most of our community has heard, you know, any of these pieces performed at least live before. And so I get a lot of joy out of bringing a brand new piece just that someone has never heard before, whether it's new music or whether it's Baroque or classical music. And so I try and craft programs with all of that in mind, like something for everybody. It's fun.
Well, it sounds like that's kind of how you found your voice as a flutist is connecting with people through unfamiliar works and kind of introducing them to new things from whatever era. So Nicole, I guess, do you feel like finding your voice as a composer and kind of finding your message that you want to send to people, is that journey similar to what we kind of go through as flutists and as performers, or is it different? I don't think a lot of people hear about that side of things.
Like, will I leave writing the way I am with extended techniques? It's something you think about, and you should be always thinking about, when will I evolve to something else? Am I tired of it, or are people tired of it? I don't know when I change. But for right now, I'm just leaning into it and enjoying it. I mean, I thought early on I would do like 1 or 2 pieces and then move on, because it was a gimmick, it was a trend. But it seemed to become more of like like you said, my voice. And that's something we talked about a lot in composition lessons. You know, Dr. Davis was like, you know, there was one piece I had written, I think end of my junior year, beginning of my senior year. It was a woodwind quintet that is not published. And he's like, I think you're starting to find your voice. And that was like the biggest compliment he could give me, was like, I think this structural thing you're doing is like what you should embrace more of. I think you've hit on it. And so I did structurally start to do, and it was like some fragmentation of theme, which is what I do a lot. I think, I mix it up with meters and things to kind of break up the theme so it's not so predictable. In my mind, I don't know if that comes across, but anyway, so yeah, that's a journey you always do, and see if it should evolve and change to keep interest in what you're, for yourself mainly, and what other people might be interested in hearing from you, because you can't just write the same thing over and over again, and sometimes it feels like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you both kind of keep the passion and excitement alive for what you're doing? I mean, you're both teaching young people, people that are kind of deciding what they're going to do. I feel like when you're kind of green like that, you have lots of zest for life, and it's all exciting because it's all unknown. But then sometimes when you've graduated, you've had a job, you're more into this new phase of your life, things can get a little mundane. So what are you both doing to just keep the excitement?
Well, I think that taking on projects like the one we just did.
Yeah.
Right?
That was hard. Like the things that make us uncomfortable.
Yeah. Nicole was joking yesterday that my role is to call her up and I'll say, I have an idea. And she usually goes, oh no, how much work is this going to be for me? And so I did that with the album. I did that with the book.
album was probably more.
Yeah.
Because it had something I really hate talking about, which is money.
Yeah, you know,
that's financially, like that was gonna financially entangle both of us more than anything. Yeah, but I'm we'll figure it out. We're just gonna do it. We're gonna say we're going to do it. We'll start it, and then we'll figure it out as we go. And it usually works out. You know, we end up figuring out a plan. But that's why it's nice to do these projects with another person, because it's not just all on you. We can bounce ideas off of each other. But yeah, I'm excited in this career because there's just so much to explore in a career as a musician. You can like record and you can write and perform live. And I'm outside of Nashville, so moving there, I've done a little bit of like studio session recording work, which is a lot of fun. And yeah, so this far into my career, just doing this whole new facet of music that I had never done before was fun. And teaching all ages, I teach, well, at one point I was teaching 4-year-olds all the way through. I had a student who was in her 80s all at the same time. And I always think of something that my mom said. My mom was a career counselor. And so every day she would meet a new group of people, and her job was to get to know them and give them different tests and find their strengths and then figure out what was the right fit for them. And she said she loved her job because in 30 years of working the same job, no 2 days were ever exactly the same. And I took that to heart, I think, growing up and hearing that. So, of course, I wanted a job where no 2 days were exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, now I'm curious. Did she do that test on you?
What's that?
No, I'm curious.
Test on me?
Test on you?
She did, yeah. Actually, it was fun. Every time they would get a new test into the assessment center, if I was old enough, my brother or I would come in and we would try it out and play with it as she was figuring out the grading system and how it all worked.
Yeah.
So, yes, from a young age, I knew my strengths. I knew my spatial perception is terrible. That's why I have a backup camera on my car now. Yeah. I knew all of those things. And we had this other joke. It was her sarcasm that my mother never told me I could do anything I wanted to do. My mother said, take your skills and your interests and your strengths and turn that into your career. Because at one point I was like, I want to be a vet. And my mom said, okay, do you like science? I said, no, I hate science. And she said, then maybe that's not a career, that's a hobby.
Yeah.
Your love of pets.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Sounds great to have
an interesting way.
Yeah, and it sounds, I mean, you're very fortunate also to have someone like that in your life to mentor you in that way. I think a lot of people can sometimes be out there on their own and not really have any guidance or know what to do and can feel like you're a little lost.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you each, I mean, you've had that support in your life. How do you each support each other in all of your projects?
Daily video chats.
Oh, great.
I mean, since COVID.
It feels like it. Yeah. We talk all the time.
We do. Yeah. And sometimes it's career talk. Sometimes it's like, all right, today we have to get work done on the book or the album. Or some days it's just,
does always
chatting with your friends.
It always does come back to that, though. Yeah, like we just start to talk about just stuff going on. But
advice is teachers, advice is performers, as people running our own businesses, in like the freelancing and composing side. Or we have a lot of talks of about being women navigating this field. It's just it's nice. And we should also say our friend Matt Angelo, who's a flutist and did the album with us, is another really
he's included in most of those videos.
Really strong voice,
whether he likes it or not.
Right. So whether it's just being the supportive voice to hear your venting at the end of a stressful day. Which during COVID and COVID teaching and COVID performing, there's been a lot of that.
Yeah. And we both married people that are pretty awesome about that too.
Yeah.
Like, they've put up with both of our shenanigans apart and together.
Right.
And Brian, not so much because just because of my husband, Brian, geographically, it's always worked where we've just kind of met up or I have gone to you, because that's where the thing was. And so Brian is just now actually, we've been friends for 10 years, but Brian's just this year starting to understand Mary. So this is only your second visit since we've met. And so Brian's like, because he doesn't like to travel, so he doesn't usually go with me to things.
And my husband Brandon, I'll say, he edited our book. He was one of the editors on the book, and then he also was one of the producers on our album, and has a very different personality than both of us. Very dry, very direct, and that's something that we need in this mix. But also, just in terms of supporting professionally, I would say I do program Nicole's music a lot.
Oh,
but
yeah, she needs to take a break, I think, or they're going to be suspicious attack.
I know. Yeah. I don't do it like, I'm only programming my friend's music. It's always I explore all the rep out there when given a concert opportunity, and it just usually works out that one of her pieces is perfect for it.
Or is that my evil plan?
Or is that your evil plan, right? Of casually slipping in
It's not support as much as it is just manipulation.
Like coercion,
I don't even know what's happening.
My husband calls it codependence.
Yeah. But we also do, I perform a lot of her music, or if someone is looking to commission someone, I'll say, well, this is a composer I work with a lot who has been great to work with, and maybe check out her stuff. So yeah, I think that it's worked out that way over time, that we support our projects that we didn't necessarily do together. Just as much as the projects we have collaborated on.
Well, it's kind of great. I mean, I think we're all, like many musicians anyway, are like-minded in that we love collaboration. we're kind of in this because we like working with other people and working together and working on projects as a team and as a group. So I think you two are both illustrating that beautifully, and it's great to see your strong friendship and your close personal relationship too, and putting out these wonderful new projects. So congrats to you both, and we wish you all the best and best of luck. And thank you again for being here today.
Oh,
thank you.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having us
Thanks so much
to yammer on about our lives.
I love it. Well, thanks again to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.